I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here Friday. It's the Healing Circle. Want to shout out to my friends and colleagues and co-hosts today from the African American Child Wellness Institute Project, Daryl Gillespie and Zoe Severson. Hey, Daryl. Hey, Joey. How are you
Hi.
doing?
Good. How you doing?
Hey,
I'm doing good. I just talked to Daryl a minute ago, Zoe, about the tragedy of another shooting right here down the street from where I live on Plymouth Avenue, outside of the Elks building, and so it makes the topic today all the more important. The topic today was the impact of COVID-19 and of violence in general, of trauma on young people in our community. And I wanted to start by asking you all just to, as clinicians, define trauma and define our concern as adults, parents, as leaders, and elders in community, and as professionals on uh, uh, identifying and naming what is trauma and how it shows up in us as individuals, and particularly as something that um, is impactful on our children. So I'm going to stop with that. And Zoe, I'm going to pass the talking stick to you first of all, and you can pass it to Brother Daryl.
So, trauma is anything that causes us to feel kind of fear, to have um, experiences of flashbacks, to have anxiety, to be scared, to have the fight, flight, or freeze. Or now there's even now the fawn, which means you're kind of wanting to please whoever is kind of scaring you or freaking you out, kind of thing. And we see that popping up in a zillion different ways that we may not even be aware of. And I'm passing the stick to Daryl.
so when you asked that question, Mr. McFarlane, I was thinking this is no time to be sophisticated. I said I'm gonna give a very, very simple answer. Anything that causes you to function in a way that takes you away from your regular functioning.
There you go.
And so what I like to tell people is this: what may cause you trauma may not cause another person trauma. And so there's no way we can really classify the things that cause us trauma, because then we will start putting hierarchies on it. Like, you shouldn't have reacted like that. Well, because I'm how I made up and because of my life experiences, we have to respect that at any given time, something can cause us not to be able to function in a healthy way. And I think that is trauma. And it shows up in how our facial, our affect, it shows up in our behavior, and it shows up in how we think. And so a lot of times we are traumatized, like Zoe said, we're traumatized sometimes and we don't even know it. And so that's why it's good for us to have a place to come and talk about it and take the stigma off of trauma, because we all are traumatized. I think, and I'll say this, and I don't know if you want me to pass it to Brenda or not.
Sure, please. Yeah.
The fact that we're living as people of color already puts us in a traumatic situation. And I'll pass it to Miss Brenda or Dr. Gray. What, I don't know your title.
Oh, please.
Brenda, I know I need to address my elders right.
I wanted to, I told someone, I said, I want to hear him preach one day. I will come straight to Minneapolis just to hear Daryl Gillespie preach. But
He's good.
He has to be. Yeah. I do want to say this. I just came out of the grocery store and I was in the parking lot, and we were having a discussion about what was going on. I mean, I live in the mountains, so there's not a lot of shoot ups around here. But I just mentioned the fact that I personally, and I think Zoe, I had mentioned this during the last healing circle, that I have really, really been working on trying to work through my problems. And I really do miss my daughters. I haven't seen my daughters in 3 years. And so, because of COVID and they're in LA or whatever. But anyway, we got into this discussion about Black mental health clinicians and psychologists. And I made the comment that there would be no white psychologists that could understand what I'm going through. And my neighbors just resented it. And I said, I'm going back, and today's healing circle. So maybe I'll pull something out of this that will explain to me why I couldn't get through to them, that their life experiences are nowhere close to mine. And I was just like, okay, God, maybe I'm not doing this right. Maybe I'm not thinking about this right. But anyway, it's good to see you. And I'm very glad to be here. But I'm not shooting off any fireworks and celebrating independence because I ain't free. So we'll see. We'll see. When Liz Cheney decided that she was going to join with the Pelosi and the Democrats on investigating January 6th, that made my morning.
Mm-hmm. Brenda, put your camera down a little bit.
I said, we are making some headway. But anyway, thank you. Was I wrong, though? Are there white psychologists that could really understand why all of this is happening?
I tell you what, I think part of the reason for them getting angry is their arrogance and putting all the stock in academia. And so we can understand there are things that you can learn from a technique standpoint to address certain things, but there's still, to me, there's a whole nother level of pain and oppression and dysfunction that we live in that folks just cannot understand. And again, I feel like people feel like they can tell us what's best for us without living in our experience. And that's a matter of impossibility. So I hope that you continue to tell them that, and there's no disrespect to
None
them
whatsoever.
But
it wasn't personal.
It's a reality that you can't treat. I just got out of a meeting, and I told a therapist, a Latino therapist, I said, when you was in school, did you learn about any Latino therapist? You learned about Freud and Ellis and Jung and Rogers and all these different psychologists that have theories that come out of their experience. And I told my ethics teacher, why? I said, as much hell as Black folks have caught, why don't we have a theory that comes from a Black person that we can study and apply to our practices? And we don't have that. So that puts it on us to continue to be confident in what we do and learn how to produce mechanisms that may not be Eurocentric, but they're still effective.
And so let me jump in. Can I have a talking stick?
I'll pass it to you,
Dr. B. Come in. So I can write some philosophy down here.
I love to hear Daryl and Zoe talk, because they are really in the know about how young people are dealing with mental health, and that teenagers and preteens, they come and see them, and I always call them the teenage whisperers. But other folks can say to them they can't hear, but they can somehow. It's palatable if it comes from Daryl. It's palatable if it comes from Zoe. So if it's coming from their grandma or their mama, not so much. So one of the things that I agree that white institutions don't teach Black models, but there are Black models. We have one in our clinic, our African-centered wellness model. We have multiple Black theorists, Wade Nobles, Naeem Akbar. We have Latinos like Dr. Lillian Gomez Diaz. We have lots of people. And our brother who came here one time to sit with us, the elder who's Mexican. So one of the things, Chicano. So one of the things we have to think about is who writes the history, who writes the rules, who creates the ethics codes, who judges us if we're right or wrong, who evaluates us as clinicians, when it's time to get our license, they're all white people. So I say Black clinicians, we have to go out of our way. Just like Daryl said, we have to go out of our way. The onus is on us to learn how to treat us. But I can tell you that competency is not equivalent with skin tone. Because there's a lot of Black folks who are blacker than something. Let's talk about Clarence Thomas. His values as a Black person, he's a real chocolate brother, but it doesn't speak well of his values. So there are people who are white who have closer values to us than Black folks like Clarence Thomas. So it doesn't always come wrapped in a, that's right. It doesn't always come wrapped up in a skin tone. But what it does do when you have a Black clinician, it increases the probability that they are aware or woke enough in their Black skin and in their Black bodies to know what it feels like to be a Black person. Same thing goes with gender. No matter how much we talk, as Black women, we can't teach a Black man what it means to be a Black woman. They can't understand that. We can try to explain, demonstrate, write charts and books. They will never understand us. And I guess it goes for brothers as well. So I just want to throw my 2 cents out there in the ring to say it's about learning to be competent with your community and the higher probability of familiarity. And when you are part of the Black culture, then there are things you know that other people can't teach. You know, when we raise our hand, it means something to us. White folks don't know. They think you're asking a question. We know we testifying. Sometimes when at church we do put our hand up like this, we know what that means. They don't. So it's a lot of subtleties in our culture. But what I see now is that there's some genetic things. Did y'all talk about Judge Cahill yet?
Not
in
yet.
the
No.
case?
No.
Let me just shut up for a minute. Let my brother Al have a. Here you go. Let me give you the stick back so you can keep
We'll
it
come
rolling.
back to that, but as we're talking, thank you, Dr. B. And the principles that you have described are principles that apply in all arenas. And case in point, yesterday I had a visit with a new cardiologist, and the cardiologist is a brother, Dr. Mosi Bennett. And it's not that I was unhappy with the cardiologist that I had at Health Partners, which is where my insurance is, but I just wasn't aware that this African-American physician was available in the marketplace. And through working with Batala and the Insight Health Equity Action Lab and their partnership with the Minneapolis Heart Institute to talk about heart issues for our community, Black community, I met Dr. Bennett and other Black physicians, cardiologists, and so I changed my physician from the person that I met, I was okay with at Health Partners, but didn't have the same connection. And when I met with Dr. Bennett yesterday, I'm telling you, Brenda, the feeling, the experience, is different. It's different. And I know that the person that I was talking to before is probably as competent, very competent, but there is something in me that makes me feel more known or more understood or more something or another. I don't have the words for it, but I just feel good. So the point I'm making is supports what you're saying, Dr. B, is Black skin doesn't give you any more knowledge, but culture does. And for me, it's a question of feeling like the person that is serving me is aware of all the things I bring in experience and in knowledge and expectations, those things that are spoken and unspoken. And for some, there's an inability to speak it because they haven't lived it. And my sense is that this brother, through his growing up in his lineage, has a access to a vocabulary that I operate in and through as well. And it makes life easier for me. So with that, let me shift. I'm hoping that Lily's going to join us. I talked to her a couple of seconds ago, and she'll be joining the call. Lily Rankin is our resident young person who is a intern writer for Insight News and just an activist and an actor, and happens to be my niece, and I'm so proud of her, but hopefully she'll be on the call in a couple of seconds. And the topic has to do with this question of the impact of trauma, the trauma of COVID-19, the trauma of the insurrection, and that follows the murder of George Floyd, the trauma of the murder itself for everybody, but particularly the young people that witnessed the murder. And there were at least two that we know of that were on site. There was the young woman who was, and you've used her name before, Brenda, who did the video. Darnella. And there was another child, I think maybe 9 or 10 years old, who was there with parents. So the question is, what is the impact of witnessing that going to be on their lives? And what kind of trauma are they experiencing? And the reason that's important, not only for them, but for society, is that one of the considerations Judge Cahill had in determining what sentence to impose on Derek Chauvin was whether or not a crime was committed in front of juveniles, people in general, but juveniles in particular, and the traumatic impact of that offense being committed in front of these children. And what I understand is that the question as to whether or not the Judge Cahill, considered that these children were experiencing trauma. And that's what I wanted to bring up today. So Dr. B, Yali, good to see you. I'm going to pass the talking stick back to you, Dr. B. Let's talk about that. Again, that's why I started off asking our colleagues, Brother Gillespie and Sister Severson, to define trauma in our experience. What does it mean? And particularly for young people. So Dr. B, let's take the conversation to the question of whether these children were impacted, were they traumatized, and how this court ought to have used their experience in evaluating the sentence that it gave to Derek Chauvin.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to take it back. Thank you, brother. I want to say that the circumstance that created this problem in our community was that the way the court works, it's my understanding, and I know this for a fact, that anytime a parent or an adult or anyone exhibits some criminal behavior, it has to be witnessed by a child. Violence, drug sales, anything, those are considered acts of abuse. And when a child witnesses a murder, especially the murder of an adult, it's critically important that we understand that their brains, no matter what, because their brains don't even totally formed till they're 26 years old. And so that their little brains are looking at this and trying to make sense of what they're seeing with their eyes and their head and their heart. So for children, when something bad happens to an adult, adults are supposed to be more powerful than children. And if they in that segue in that system and hierarchy, they see adults, especially men, are supposed to be stronger and more protective than are maybe their ideas of what women can do. But what they see is when a woman is harmed, who's like the age of a mother, when a man is harmed, like the age of a dad or a grandpa, that insult and assault is greater for them, because they say, if something can happen to a grown man, who am I as a child, a little girl, or a teenager, or even an 18-year-old boy who was the one who set the ball rolling by questioning whether that was a legal $20 bill or not? Who am I as a child to do anything about it? So the young man, when he came to court, he talked about his guilt, the guilt of that day. He broke down talking about, I feel guilty. If only I wouldn't have said something or handled it differently. The young girl who was 9 watching it said she kind of went to the store and she came out and everybody was looking and she knew it was something very bad. And then the teenager, 17-year-old Darnella, who took the front part of the scene, and another 17-year-old girl across the street took the back part of the scene. So these children testified in that court of law in front of the murderer. Just think about that. In front of the murderer, in their faces. and the dead men they couldn't save. The one that Darnella said remind her of her brother, her cousin, her uncle, her father. So I'm just gonna pass that talking stick to Brother Daryl and let you just finish the rest of that story.
So, I mean, I can't help but finishing the rest of that story about talking about myself and then talking about a client. Because of that, because of this whole situation here lately, they have, because of the gun violence in North Minneapolis, the pastors have been asked to go to the spots and pray where some of these shootings are taking place. And I have been having visions of police killing me, white people shooting me, and I was physically and emotionally and spiritually scared. I was scared, and my brain is developed. I'm 54 years old, and I trust God, but I was scared to go to these different places. So Gillespie hasn't showed up that way, and I could mask it in. That's not how my gifts are used, and I can do all of that. But when it comes down to the core issue that I'm scared of getting shot because of a stray bullet or getting killed. And I know Chauvin had his knee on the neck of George Floyd. But I have little clients. I have 9 and 10-year-old clients coming into my office talking about they think they're going to get killed by police. This is what these little boys are saying every day. They're having nightmares, they're having dreams, and they had nothing to do. They weren't there. So just imagine somebody who saw a man physically being killed by a policeman when you have all this hope and all this allegiance to a person that can keep you safe, and they're dead, and there's nothing you can do. And I think the trauma, if we define it as something that stops us from functioning well, think about the kid's inability to process and think about that over and 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 over again with nobody, because we are traumatized and we may not know it, nobody there to really open this thing up and talk about it and describe it and try to put some closure to it. And it's hard to put closure to it because it keeps happening over and over and over again. So now the conversation in the home is about how this person did this and how this person did that. And so they're caught up. So they keep getting re-traumatized. So we talk about the initial trauma, but now you got complex and trauma that's all working it all out. And so for kids, for the judge not to really think about that, to me says, again, we're not thinking about our babies. We're not thinking about them. Laws and policies are not made for us to be healthy, and which again speaks to us to be able to do what we need to do. And I'm gonna pass it to Zoe.
Yeah, there we go. So exactly. I mean, when we've been re-traumatized, and it's one thing for us adults, as Daryl said. It's one thing we kind of have some coping mechanisms. We've kind of lived life. We've seen this. We can kind of figure it out somewhat. Yes, we're still traumatized, but we can still fake it till we make it, kind of thing, a little bit. However, children, they don't have those capabilities. They haven't learned all their coping skills. They don't know what's going on. They don't have the words or the vocabulary or the brain function to even understand what they're seeing. And then we see it happen over and over. And us as parents and, extended family, we're supposed to help to instill hope. But how can we instill hope when it keeps happening? And so what's that doing to our children when they don't have any? We can't honestly say it's not going to happen again. We can't say that you can go outside and you're going to be okay, especially in North Minneapolis right now. And that's horrible. I mean, I remember I grew up in North Minneapolis and I was able to go outside. I mean, sure, there's some parameters, but I certainly wasn't freaking out that there was going to be literally a gun, people shooting within, a block or right next door to me, or that when I'm sleeping, it might go through my window, or that a cop was actually going to kill somebody right in front of me. Those things not even close in my mind, and that's what the little kids are seeing, and that's what they're hearing, and that's what they're seeing. And it's hard. It's even more complex because at least when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet like this. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have social media plastering everything over and over and over and over and over again. And that traumatizes us as adults. But think about the kids who don't understand and all that's going in and that's saying, don't trust, don't trust, don't trust, don't trust. And we need to work on building a communities and somehow coming together so that we can stop this and we can stop this kind of self-hatred, hurting each other. And obviously we need a redo of the police system, obviously. But we have to actually start to really make serious efforts to change things, because without that, our kids I really think, are in a lot of trouble. You know, and that's, our job as therapists to kind of help and find hope and find creative ways to work through the trauma. But it's really difficult when it keeps happening and the kids that are being hurt look just like them. It's not a little white girl. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's not. It's not a little white girl. It's not a little white boy that this is happening to. It's little black children, and what that says about society, and it's really painful. And yeah, so I'll pass it to Mr. Yelly since you haven't talked yet.
Okay, go ahead, Yelly.
Thank you, my dear sister, and good afternoon, everybody. I was going to be running errands for Dr. B, and then when I read while we were finishing staff meeting, somebody sent this news, breaking news item to us about George Cahill, saying what he said about the children laughing, and that was why he didn't take that into consideration. You see, here we go again. A Caucasian person who knows nothing about us, who thinks because he's a judge, now he's acting like a god. And he's going to tell us that Black children or African American children, their trauma doesn't really matter because they were laughing. Who is he? He's not an expert on children trauma. But what gives him the authority or the audacity to be making judgment on these kids when he doesn't even have any qualification whatsoever on the subject matter? I mean, this arrogance of knowledge, arrogance of knowing that we know everything about Black community when they know nothing about our Black community. What gives him the impression that he can make a judgment and think he can get away with it? So what I see is this. I think I heard Brenda saying that she said something and a Caucasian neighbor of hers got mad. I don't know the perspective, and the ramification of what was being talked about. I was sitting in the what do you call it? In the backyard, exactly, the waiting room, and I heard that. But then the issue is this: if they have never experienced what it feels like to be an African American or a Black person, I don't like using that word Black or white, because nobody's Black or white. But that was a sociology of sociology to basically rationalize slavery in this country. So we're going to leave that alone for now. But then what gives this man or any Caucasian person the authority to make judgments on an experience they've never had to deal with in their life? What gives them that judgment is arrogance of knowledge and arrogance that they can just basically treat our body any way they want to treat us. So Minnesota, there's this so-called Minnesota nice. This is not being Minnesota nice. This is being Minnesota ignorant. And somebody needs to tell this person, or somebody needs to teach them how to make judgments. I mean, until they understand the subject matter, or they hire somebody who is qualified to make judgment on that subject matter. Not only is he wrong about making that judgment, somebody needs to, I don't want to say sanction him, but for him to even publicize that I'm not going to increase the number of years because the children. Who is he to even make that judgment when you don't even have that understanding of the children or that subject matter? I'm really, really, really angry, and I don't know if I'm making a lot of Never mind. I'll hang. I'm going to pass the stick back to Dr. V.
Okay, thank you. I hear your anger, and I think it's a righteous anger because what that's doing is negating the value of our children. There's a Minnesota student survey that they do every 3 years. And the most recent one said that about 25% of Black children feel anxious, worried almost all the time. And I say, when they looked at those kids, that was pre George Floyd. The next one, I want to see what it looks like post George Floyd. I would not be surprised if those scores are even elevated higher because you can't feel safe if those who keep you safe aren't safe. You
Dr.
can't
V,
be.
you said 5%. But then what is the significance of that compared to their cohorts who are Caucasian?
Also, and I think it was like 9% of white kids.
9% versus 25.
Yeah, I think that it was just a great disparity between the two experiences. And so
Exactly.
what I was going to say is that given that negation of Black kids, it's important to understand as a Black child what happens in your society that makes you feel unsafe, and how can we as the adults caring for these young people help them to feel safe. So our resident expert in being a teenager is Lily. So Lily, are you available to talk? Can I give you the talking
Yeah,
stick?
yeah, I am.
Here you go, honey. Take the talking stick.
Okay.
And Lily, bring your camera down just a little bit because your chin is resting at the bottom of the frame. So,
Mine?
yeah, or either bring your camera down or up. There you go. Perfect.
There you go.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's better.
Yeah.
Can I get the question again?
Yeah,
So
what
the question
can
again,
we as adults do to make teenagers feel safer? What do you need to feel safer in this environment where kids are getting killed and grown-ups are getting killed by police and each other? What do you need from grown-ups to make you feel safe?
So, how I believe it is, it's not just grown-ups, it's a community that needs to grow together. And grown-ups is a good start. Being in a healthy and positive environment with with your grown-ups and your guardians or your parentals, like it helps, and knowing that you're safe with them puts a safe spot um in you, so then you can go out and be maybe okay with other people, or not have a problem with you know because there is like parental issues that some people have that hurts an individual with other adults, and that's a different story as well. But it's just keeping safe and feeling safe with your adults, and maybe reaching out with your adults, keeping contact, maybe every day a check-in, because or every other day a check-in, because in like a thorough check-in, because sometimes parents will be like, oh, how's your day, and it goes, and the kids goes, oh, I'm fine, and that's the end of the discussion. It's like it's a reach into how are they feeling, and maybe even getting into how the parents are feeling, so the kids can be like, oh, I understand that, oh, I've had that happen, or just a healthy bonding moment there. And it would be really good and essential for children, especially teenagers, because sometimes teenagers do feel like they can't be out, or they can't be like creative enough or out of the box. That's why my school personally have we have like 52 clubs.
Lily, excuse me. Can you talk more into your microphone because your voice is far back for us? We need more volume from you, and I'm not sure if it's a question of proximity to your microphone.
My
I don't know where your microphone is, but your voice is a little bit not as strong as it could be.
yeah, my microphone's pretty back.
Okay, okay.
But I'll get headphones in a second. But yeah, just what I was saying is like the feeling of, safe and being safe with others, and check-ins would help. And yeah, I feel like because sometimes teenagers can feel like they're separate or they want to be separate and have some safe space by themselves, which is great, but also keeping it together and bonding with your family is nice. So I'll pass the talking stick to Dr. B.
Dr. B, we can't hear you.
That's true. I muted myself so I wouldn't be making noise. And one of the things I was gonna ask Lily, and I'll ask her when she comes back after changing her mics, is that I'm hearing her say to us adults, her instruction is that we should not stay on the surface. Let's don't do a cursory, hey, how you doing? Because we got to do dinner or pick up laundry or whatever it is we're doing. Let's not be cursory in our engagement with them. Let's dig a little deeper and let's dig a little more often in terms of how was your day and not stopping at that, but going deeper about, well, did you hear about or what are they saying at school about? And I'm hearing her say parents and grown-ups who are in children's lives, teenagers especially, they kind of look like they push us off, but they really often don't mean to push us off. What they really need is a deeper conversation and a more effort on our part to get to know them, to hear them, to feel them, and to share with them our own experiences, our own advice. Is that sounding what you're saying, Lily?
Yeah,
is that right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yay. Okay. I'll hold the stick now and pass it to Sister Brenda.
I'm coming from an educator and coming from a parent. First of all, I'm 74 years old and I can't get Derek Chauvin's face out of my psychic when he is down on George Floyd and he's looking at Darnella and the crowd, and it's like he's posing. Take my picture. I don't care because nothing's going to happen to me.
Yep.
And it was just something about not just the 9 minutes, but his facial. It was like, I don't care. I wanted to get him on May 25th, you know? And so what happens to Darnella and the little 9 or 10-year-old? They can't get that out. My youngest daughter's 40 years old. She's gone through more racism than I can ever. I mean, bringing in the Klan, bringing in CORE. I mean, we've gone through it in white environments, academic environments. And Gianni, she's not over it. And that happened when she was 12 years old.
That's right.
When she was kicked off of a school bus and spit on. She never did put that jacket back on that her grandmother bought her. And at 40, she's still talking about that jacket. So one thing that I think from an educator is that parents have got to start early, establishing that bonding. And they have to know that we are there for them no matter what they did. We've got to be able to give them that person they can trust. And a lot of kids don't have teachers, don't have parents. And when we did the interviews with foster care, I was blown away. What happens to these kids that are abandoned, who are afraid, and 2/3 of them are our kids.
Yeah.
So we've got to do some things. I'm not in Minneapolis, but I watch the news. And I just know we've got to start really bonding and making our kids feel that they are valued. And Daryl, I'm sorry, the church has just lost its way.
Yep.
I mean, we had tutoring, and we had sleepovers, and we had dinners, and we had picnics, and we jumped on a train, and God was still there with us.
That's right. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Teach.
he's not there in some of our families.
That's right.
I'd been long gone. Al did an interview, and I just wrote an article. It's probably one of my best. I'm sorry, Al. I put my foot in that. These women, no, it's Hope Harbor and Delina Harper and Lori Hill, and all of the people that Al has interviewed. That was it for me. I mean, I have never heard a story. The book is called God's Teardrop. And it was the most powerful story that I had ever read. And Al will tell you, I think he got that article at 4 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep. I had to write it. And the trauma that these women have been through. And so now they're helping others. And you know that those women have children and they're trying to deal with their homelessness and their lack of job and not knowing who's going to eat and who's, well, we could go to the church. We could call up the pastor at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning and say, my baby's in trouble, Pastor. Yes. And I need some. It doesn't happen that way anymore. Maybe in some ways, but not the way it was when we were growing up. And we had to be in church. Or either we didn't go to the show, Carver and Linwood, Al. You know, you went to Sunday school and you went to church. And then you could have your fun. But you're going to have morals. You're going to have values, and you're going to be in school. And if that's not the case, then we need to start over from scratch. And Al will tell you, the neighborhood we grew up in, if Mama wasn't there, Nanny was. So we knew we had fear in God, and we had fear in the adults that we trusted.
Yes.
And we have to start early. We have to start because these little kids, we were listening to Al, senior, not junior, but he was talking about how these kids are 9 and 10 years old with guns in their hands. Talking about, I'm going to smoke you out. My goodness, I was eating cream of wheat. I'm going to pass it over. I'm going to pass it back to Al.
I'm going to pass it to Dr. B. Dr. B, go ahead.
I'm sitting here thinking about how healing takes place and how the lack of acknowledgement of our humanity persists. And it's so insidious and deeply woven into the fabric of this nation that even we have internalized our less than-ness. We forget that the God who created the heaven and the earth and everything in it created us. And how on earth could that being so powerfully create us uniquely? That there's no one else on this whole planet, not one exactly like us. Even if you're identical twins, you are not exactly alike. How did that God do that? And yet we don't honor it in ourselves. And we have judges like Cahill and juries and teachers and institutions and systems that are in lockstep in terms of holding dominion over us. They're in lockstep in seeing us as less than. They're in lockstep in terms of seeing us as weak or criminals or microaggressive ways. seeing us as dumber, anything sicker, dumber, more criminal, more disease, whatever it is. If you're a BIPOC, a person of color, especially the darker you are, the worse you are. I don't understand how people can coexist, pray on Sunday to that same God, and on Monday say those black children's tears don't matter. I'm gonna pass
Dr. B,
that to Sister.
I'd actually
Okay,
like
go
you to
ahead.
talk
You
about
got it.
that what we would be seeing in our children and even in ourselves, like some of the symptoms, like how would we know that we might be having some trauma symptoms, complex trauma, or that we might be passing along secondary trauma to our kids? What does that look like?
Are you asking me, or you want
Dr. B or Daryl?
or
So-
both? Let me let Daryl go first, because I gave him the stick. Go ahead, brother.
And so, Dr. B, I'm gonna let you answer that question. I want to talk to Ms. Gray for a second. So, the church, and again, I can't speak. I can speak for my church, but I can speak for what I see. And I hope I don't talk too long. When I went to grad school, my original degree, I thought I was gonna get in social work. Well, because the social work program at the U couldn't accommodate somebody working and going to school, I had to go to St. Mary's. And not only that, I had to get a doctorate degree in psychological counseling. And I argued with God about why can't I do social work? Why did I have to do psychology? I understand now from a spiritual perspective why I had to do psychology. I had to do psychology so I could understand some of these things that I have to deal with not only my members and families, but but the neighborhood and the communities that I work in. It is not sexy to do trauma work in the church. Mm-hmm. And because the churches are so bent on keeping the doors open and having financial gain, the goal or the commitment to the community, how the church in Acts did it, Acts 2, when everybody had all things in common and you brought all your goods to the city so everybody could have what they need and nobody talked about anybody, nobody was judgmental. We brought our stuff together. We have to get back to that, and that, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's really hard. When we get our men's talk, I said this: some of these pastors are not living lives for our young people to even be influenced by them, because they're doing the same thing that the folks on the street are doing, and because of that, we have no influence. So when you talk about getting back to what we used to do, we got to get back to integrity, where what we do when nobody's watching should always be the standard of behavior that we should have all the time. And I think that's about caring for people, having stuff for people. If somebody's family's not handling, take the baby into your house. I didn't took so many people into my house, it don't even make sense. But it's not for y'all it's not for it to be on TV. It's not for y'all to talk about it. I just did it because it's the right thing to do. And that's why when I work with kids, they can hear me because they hear my heart. So we have to be able to do the work with our own trauma, and we have to get our hearts right. So then we'll know trauma has become so normal, Zoe, that we don't even know it's trauma. It's dysfunction is so normal. We don't even know the difference between dysfunction and what's normal and what's healthy. And that's why we have so much stuff. So we got to get some people who understand what health is, number one, and then help somebody without dogging them out. Help somebody without a hidden agenda. Help somebody because that's the right thing to do. And that's when they feel your heart. They know you're not trying to get something from. That's why we can't get trust, because too many people that are in these positions to help are doing it for the wrong reason. And people who are suffering and who are trying to make this, who are surviving, they can peep us out, and then it doesn't work. So I give it to you, Dr. B.
I thank you, and I know we're going to get ready to take it on home. I see we're getting short on time, but I want to say this last thing, then I want to answer Zoe's question. And the question that she was really alluding to is, well, it's kind of twofold. One part of it is, how do we know we're traumatized? Well, Daryl, you already started the conversation, because you said sometimes we think trauma is normal. I remember 9/11, Everybody was scared staying in the house. I
Mhm.
went downtown. I'm not lying. I was in my car. The only people I saw around downtown or around town were black folks. We were still walking around doing our everyday business. And I kind of asked some questions and I thought to myself, I said, yes, because saying it's just another day a bunch of people get killed. And so if you're saying that, and that's the way you've normalized it, you're not going to be scared of Twin Towers falling on you. You're scared of that every day. You're just scared when you go in that office and you're the only black one. You're scared when you go in that classroom and you're the only black one. You're scared when you're in a black neighborhood and you see a white cop riding behind you. You checking your brakes, you checking your lights, you see your heart starts beating fast. Or even if you're in Minnetonka in your Lexus, like happened to me. I had a Mercedes one time. I got rid of it because I got stopped 6 times in 3 months.
Mm.
And one of the police asked me, "Why'd you go past me?" I'm going, "You in the other lane." And I know I wasn't speeding. He just said, "Oh, this black woman in a Mercedes. How dare she go past me?" So I'm just telling. And when I contested the ticket, I went to the courthouse, and who did I see there but a bunch of black folks? I said, "And you think we were living in Chocolate City?" Because everybody in the courtroom waiting to contest their tickets were black. I said, well, maybe the white folks either didn't get tickets, or maybe they just paid them off, or maybe they got dropped. But it was, 90% of the people in that space were black. So that lets me know that we have to heal, and that trauma, it can be acute, right? You can see it right away, but trauma can be delayed. We have delayed demarcation for post-traumatic stress. It happens after the incident. Anything in the 30 days of it is called acute stress disorder. That means you're stressed out. You look like you have PTSD. It can dissipate in 30 days. But when you see kids coming into a courtroom a year later saying, I can't sleep, I'm scared, I feel guilty, I should have, I could have, I would have. That lets you know diagnostically they're still crying, they're still breaking down. That lets you know they're hurting and they're not healed. Now, common sense would tell you they're hurting. Everybody can see these children hurting, except the judge minimizes their pain. That's what I'm still stuck on. So
Dr.
we
J.
know that, yes, sir. Let me just finish this line and we got about 2 more minutes. So we got to know that when people feel like they avoid the location, that's a sign. When you avoid people who remind you of what happened to George Floyd, that's a sign. When
Yes,
you
it
have
is.
nightmares or can't sleep and you have intrusive thoughts, that means they're on your shoulder, waking you up, and you can't get rid of them. You keep going, maybe I should have, maybe I could have, if only I would have, maybe I could have do it over. And you re-envision that experience and you try to replay it in your mind. You get nervous when you see police coming toward you. You get nervous maybe when you see white folks coming toward you. You get nervous if you're on the street by yourself. All of these are signs that you've been traumatized because it interferes with your daily function. You can't do what you used to do the way you used to do it because now you've got this block of fear. And I guess that hits it most. Zoe, do you want to add anything on it before we give it to Mr. Yelling?
I'm just thinking that kids, they may have behavioral issues. You may see that spike. They used to be a pretty mellow, laid back kid or rowdy, but all of a sudden now they're getting into fights. Now all of a sudden they're not wanting to do their homework. Now they're snapping back at parents that where they didn't used to snap back. And parents are thinking, "Oh my gosh, my kid's out of control." And not thinking that it's related to trauma, whether they've actually seen it themselves, whether they've heard about it, whether they've absorbed it through social media. But we need to be aware of that, and we need to start to take steps to help the kids into form community, get them into therapy, talk to them about it, explain what they're feeling. Because a lot of times kids don't know what they're feeling and why they're feeling it. And to let them know that it's a normal, natural, traumatic response to what happened to them. So go ahead,
And
Mr.
that there are
Young.
skills. That's right. And that there are skills and trainings that they can gain to help them cope with that pain. So Yelly, I'm gonna give you 1 minute to pass it on to
Actually,
Brother Al.
I'm going to take 30 seconds. What I still don't understand or can't fathom is this. This judge sat in that courtroom for days and weeks, listening to these children telling the world about how traumatized they were. And then he's going to write in this brief that they weren't traumatized. So where was he? Was he sitting there, or he just thought that, well, I don't care. They're just black children, and they're not traumatized, regardless of how many times and how long they told the world in his courtroom that they were traumatized. So help me, anybody on this panel, help me understand, how do we correct that?
Let me take the.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I was just going to say, let me take the clinical perspective and give it to my brother Al. I was just going to say maybe the judge himself was traumatized, because we have this concept called dissociation where you check out. So maybe he checked out. It was too painful for him. I'm just saying, if he had that humanity, maybe he checked out. I don't know. I can't say. That's the only excuse he could have, that I wasn't there, although I was there. I'm passing it to Brother Al.
Well, let me close the program with this suggestion for action. And if you're listening, first of all, this has been a wonderful and powerful conversation. And what we're doing, Dr. B and Brother Yelly and Brother Gillespie and Brenda and Sister Zoe, Sister Lily, what we're doing in having this conversation is rich and important. And I'm so glad to be here with you every week. And my intent and my desire is that we expand this conversation so that people around the community, in our professions, and around the world can participate in the critical thinking that we're bringing to critical issues of our time. So what do? I think that if there's somebody listening, can be here or anywhere in the country, anywhere around the world, write a letter. Write a letter to Judge Cahill. And if you understand what we've been talking about, or if you don't, but you want to understand, raise the question. Here's what I think they said on the Healing Circle. And if that's the case, here's what I think. And you may agree with us or not. You may agree with the judge or not. But the communication, the act of putting yourself and your idea, your thought, your sensibility into the mix is what's critical right now. In summary, write a letter. Write a letter to Judge Cahill saying that you believe that there should be consideration of the traumatic impact on the children who were present at the murder of George Floyd, but not only those children around the world. Because in a sense, because of this technology, almost every child in the world knows the name George Floyd, and they know what happened that day on the corner of 39th in Chicago when George Floyd was murdered by a officer of the law. Write a letter and express your concern that our systems need to pay attention to the impact of these actions on all of us, but particularly on children. I'm going to leave it right there. I want to thank you all for this wonderful conversation. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Today's program, The Healing Circle. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Dr. B.
We'll keep it going. We'll keep it going.
Powerful as ever.
and neglect. Tired of centuries of disrespect.
Gotta take your knee off our neck.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Oh. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired. Sick and tired. No more mothers crying, no more others dying. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. We just can't go on this way. We've got to break these chains. Now that's time to make a change. Together we can celebrate new day.
I'ma do here and tomorrow.
Say the name.
Orlando, Freddie, Eric, and Jamal.